All right, here's a walkthrough on lesson 10A-1 to make sure you know how to create this page. So we're going to open up the REPL and run it. It's going to look like this to begin with. So a couple of items that we want to handle from the box. It says remember to center the box. So this big white box in the middle needs to be centered. We have to look here and see what's holding all of this. So that's the big box. We're going to go find the big box in here, and to center, margin, auto, we'll center actually top, bottom, left, and right. There we go. So now we've got that centered. Let's go ahead and also look real quickly at the top here in the heading or the header area. That's black with orange writing. So we'll go ahead and add that in. So you got your header, background color orange, no, black. Oh, goodness, home row. And then color orange. Now, if we run this, we're going to notice a gap here, and that gap is created, and as I put a note here too, use an inline style to remove the top margin. So H1s automatically have a top margin, and that top margin always interferes up here and creates a gap. So we're just going to go ahead and take that off that H1 on that one. We can't, I already have all of H's with the margins here, so I can't do it to all of them. We're going to have to do it in line. So I'm going to take this H1, do an inline style just for margin top, just on the top, get rid of that gap, and we'll just set it to 0. Oops, here, okay. And then that hugs that into the top of that. Okay, so that takes care of that. So now we're matching on that end. Use a system where you set the parent box to table display and the child boxes to table cell to make the two side-by-side boxes. So this is a box and this is a box, and they're going to be inside of a box so that we can use this system. Okay, so before I even mess with these buttons here, I'm going to go ahead and try to get my boxes set up. So we're going to look at this. This box here is called the nav. Okay, so that's the NBA and NFL one. And then the one that has the picture and the paragraphs is called the main. And then in order to set this up so it acts like a table, so think about Word, right? Let's look at Word just to kind of make sure we understand how this works. If we create a table in Word, okay, so this is basically what that's like. If you hit enter in a table in Word, it automatically grows on both sides. So if you create a box and you set it to act like a table, and then for each side of the table, you set each of those to act as table cells, then it will grow together like that. And that's our goal on this one. It's like we want this to be the left side of the table and this to be the right side of the table. And the box that they're both in, which is going to be called another box, that box that they're both in needs to act like an actual table. Okay, so in order to do that, we'll start off, it's called another box, so I'm going to add it in here. Another box, okay, and we do want it to go all the way across the big box, so we'll set the width to 100, and then we're going to set the display to table so that the big box will, oh my goodness, can't hit my button, the big box will act like a table. And then we've got the nav, which I've got these down here already, the nav and the main. We want the nav to be a width of like 30% or so. And we want the main to take up the other side of that, so 70% or so. So this takes up 1% and this takes up 1%. And we could add floats to do that. Notice here, whenever I set it, so this one is 30% and this is 70%, but they're stacked on top of each other. So we've talked in the past about you could float these both left and they would go side by side, which is fine, but they won't grow at the same time. So if I float them, and I'll just do it for a minute, I'll just add a float left, and I'll take it out so you don't add this, but just take a look. If I float them, they'll go side by side. But if I were to make my nav a color, see, it only is this tall, so it's tiny. So it works, and it's fine if you only want this to be a color. But in our case, it's not going to work because I want that side to grow all the way to the bottom. Okay, so in this case, we're just going to set the display for each of these to table cell. And basically it treats this like this is the left cell of the table and this is the right cell of the table. So I'll do that in both of them. And then there we go. So now this one is here. And if I go put that color back on there, what you'll see now is it goes all the way down. See that? So that's the difference. And so what we say is the parent, which is the box that's holding these two babies, right? Another box, it's set to table, and then these two little baby boxes are set to table cell. And so that's how we accomplish that. Okay, so a few additional things to knock out on this one. We want to make sure the image is never outside the box. If we were to scale down, our picture pops out of the box. So we should remember that in order to fix that, we're going to go to the image and style it for a max width. And you could set whatever, 100% is fine, or you could go a little shorter. Like if you don't want it to be humongous, you could say like, 80 if you wanted to, and then it would never be bigger than that. And so now as I scale down, there we go, see? Much better. And it doesn't go all the way, across. So totally up to you on that as long as it scales with the page. So that's how we make that flexible image. Okay, now let's deal with the navigation here. So first off, our HR is dashes, and it's not huge. If you look down here, it's the same HR, and this goes all the way across because it's in the footer. So, I don't know if that's 70%, 60%, something. But let's style the HR, and if you don't recall, first off, set your border to none, and then set the border on one side. So it's going to be a dashed orange, and then, 4 pixels or something, HR. And then we want to give it a width so it doesn't go all the way across. So, like 70% or something here. So, okay, so there we go. And HRs are going to be centered automatically. So there we go. That looks good. Then we've got our little buttons. So that's the last thing that we have to do here. And they are orange. They're still underlined. The colors are the same. I didn't change anything there. But they look like boxes, and they're stacked on top of each other. So we're going to use a class in here. So you can decide what you're going to call it. I'm just going to call it the button. Okay, you're going to put that in both. And I recommend putting the class in before you create it, just so that as you're working on it, you can actually see what happens each step of the way. So first, I would say, okay, well, it's a button and it needs a background color, and that background color needs to be orange. Okay, so that takes care of the first thing. However, we want it to look more like an actual button. We want it to be something we can add padding to make the button bigger. And we also want them to stack on top of each other. Well, hyperlinks are inline elements. They're inside of something. So these are inside the nav, but they're inline elements. And they can't automatically stack without us changing that display. So we're going to set the display to block, which treats them like paragraphs, basically. So now they'll sit on top of each other. Okay, but we don't want them to go all the way across. I don't know, again, what that number is. Pretty close to the same as the HR. So we would give it a width, 65% or something. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, there we go. We're getting there. Now we need to center this, and we could try to text align center and see if that does it. That should take care of aligning our text, but it did not align our boxes. So in that case, we may need to go in and try a different situation. So the nav is what this sits in. So you could try text align center in the nav. And if that doesn't work, which it doesn't here for this particular one because of the table cell, because you can't really do that with those, what we're going to do instead is we're going to set that margin to auto on the left and right. And this is also going to do top and bottom, but it won't matter on this one. Okay, so there we go. So now that we've got it centered on the margin, we just need to make the button look bigger, right? Otherwise, it's looking pretty good. So to add add area inside the button, that's going to be padding. We're padding the button to make it look like a bigger button. You'll have to just decide how padded you want it to be, but there we go. That looks pretty good. And again, you can make that number smaller depending on what you think looks right. But essentially, it looks like we should match. Let's run this and see how it looks in the big tab. So there we go. We've got our buttons. We've got our HRs. This is centered. If I scale down, it is responsive. Yay, us. So there you go. That's just kind of a walkthrough, again, on understanding the concept of using this display table and display table cell. And again, this and this are all inside another box. And then all of these are inside the big box, which holds the whole page. So I hope that helps. Good luck.